this move to deport these Venezuelan, quote, gang members. And again, they might be gang members, but I just would have loved to have seen some evidence that they were.
This is a very disturbing thing that has happened here and is a key stepstone on the road to complete dictatorship. The administration won't even say who these people were, at least as of when I last checked the news this morning. So it's possible they deported American citizens. There are families of some of the people who were deported who say that there's no affiliation by that person with a gang. And due process is a fundamental element of a free society. Now, Tom Homan, as you probably mentioned earlier in the show, the deportation czar, says he doesn't care what judges say or do. Wow. The minute you get to that, you absolutely are now living in a dictatorship. This mealy-mouthed, well, the order was verbal. It hadn't been reduced to writing, therefore it doesn't count, is ridiculous. Any law professor, I used to be a law lecturer, will tell you that. So, I mean, this is a really disturbing action. And by the way, notice that they haven't gotten their numbers up. Trump came in saying, we're going to deport these enormous numbers of people starting right away. And in a number of days, they've been below Obama, who had been the record holder on deportations in this century, and below Biden. But yeah, we should be very worried. And the idea that we would deport people to a third country, to El Salvador, which is a dictatorship run by a pretty fascistic leader, that should also be very, very troubling. And then there's this utter contradiction of the representative of the Justice Department saying, we can't talk about a lot of this for national security reasons, when there's video of this, including produced video with music for the background to provide some drama. This is venturing into the evil version of what my children used to call Happy Go Magic Land.
Well, I mean, it was an official government media release, as you say. It was released like a little short film.
But it's a secret. It's a secret. We can't talk about it in court.
So the shining on of the judge's restraining order, the judge saying, you can't do this, you need to turn these planes around, and those that haven't taken off yet cannot take off. Despite that, and the New York Times did the timeline, there was a flight that had yet to take off that took off despite that judge's order. I'm wondering if you think this is the first sign of blowing off judicial orders that they don't agree with. It seems to be that, but is it a sign of a trend, I guess is what I'm getting at.
It's not the only judicial order that they have been thumbing their nose at. Part of the problem is there's so much litigation going on that, unless you got somebody dedicated to watching it and you follow their website, and if anybody in the chat knows of someone who's trying to do that or some organization, please post the link. Donald believes that he's a power unto himself, and we're seeing that. I mean, when I just wrote a chapter for a British book about what's happening in America, it's a bunch of I've written for the whole series of these called bite-sized books, where we take a look at some issue. And one of the points I made in my contribution was that when Trump announced his supposedly Napoleonic quote, he who saves his nation violates no law, and then the White House put out those 3 images of him with a crown, that's the moment when the front page banner headline should have been Trump claims dictatorial power, something along those lines. And instead we got these wishy-washy, namby-pamby, oh, what does this mean? What is Donald trying to tell us? When he was crystal clear, I'll do any damn thing I want. And let's remember that 6 years ago in 2019, Trump declared, I have an Article 2 that says as president, I can do anything I want. It's not, almost word for word what he said. And of course, if you just go read Article 2, just open up a browser and type in U.S. Constitution Article 2, it says the president of the United States is the errand boy of Congress who does whatever Congress says go do, plus he's commander-in-chief of the military. It doesn't say you do any damn thing you want.
But, David, those organizations to which you've referred, Congress and the U.S. military, do seem now to have been reshaped in the way that he has total control.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, this having the picture of Captain Paul Tibbets, later General Tibbets, standing next to his B-29 Superfortress that dropped the atom bomb, removing it because he named it for his mother, Enola Gay, taking every single application to the National Science Foundation, searching for the keyword woman, and then round filing those. If I'm being a little out of date here, that means throwing it in the trash can, because traditionally they were round. Is clear evidence that this is a white supremacist, misogynistic, homophobic administration in which you're one of the Tuskegee Airmen who escorted all those bomber pilots over the Mediterranean and didn't lose a single plane in or out. Oh no, we have to remove you from the website. You're a multiple Congressional Medal of Honor winner, but you're not white. Oh, we have to remove you. They did restore one or two or a small number of these, but this is right out of Orwell. We got a whole bunch of George Smiths in the employ of our government who are rewriting the actual historical account or wiping it out. And he who controls the past controls the future. Trump says he's all for peace, but he's bombing the Houthis and says, I'm going to do it more and more and more if need be. So clearly the Trump administration position is war is peace, hate is love. I forget the third one.
Well, this is a great point, because I was hearing from many, well, Donald Trump is the president of peace. And I mean, many who, from the left were saying, a lot of who are gone so far over to the left that it seemed that they had gone to the right, I hear this a lot. You heard it from Tulsi Gabbard, that one thing I like about this president is, he's a president for peace, et cetera. But he is doing more smack talking around the world than I can remember any leader in my lifetime having done. I mean, it's remarkable. He starts with our allies, Mexico and Canada, but then he goes to the European Union, then he goes to the Middle East. I mean, he knows that he's got the biggest military on earth and he has the strongest economy on earth. And so he can smack talk anybody he wants.
Yes, and this is no way to be the president of the United States. I mean, this is how an ignorant, unsophisticated person would be president. We now know what it would be like without any question. But I think there's a moment here where we should consider, we chose Donald Trump. You and I didn't vote for him. I assume most of this audience didn't. But as a people, we chose Donald Trump, especially those who stayed home and decided not to go vote, because we were down what should have been roughly 17 million votes. And once you've made a choice, you have to live with the consequences of your choices. That is the whole idea behind a democracy. We don't have a tyrant or a king who tells us what to do. We decide. Well, if we've decided to put a tyrant in the White House, which is what we have unquestionably done, then we have to live with the consequences of that. And we need to recognize that the door to push this back out and to restore democracy is getting closed and will soon be barricaded. Justice Roberts, the Chief Justice of the United States, people say of the Supreme Court, he's not, he's the Chief Justice of the United States. He finally spoke up today and said this idea that you impeach a judge because you don't like his decision is absolutely anathema. Now, hopefully, he will come to realize that cockamamie decision he wrote, that any official act of a president is beyond review except by impeachment, was crazy, unconstitutional, not thought through, and needs to be revised. I don't know how that issue would get back before the court, but we need to fix that decision, because if anybody should be strictly accountable, it's presidents of the United States.
Yeah, and I'm glad you mentioned that, the Roberts comment, because it came on the heels of Trump talking about how that judge should be impeached, and Musk talking about how
Right.
this judge should be impeached, and so I really did want to get your take on it, and so I'm glad you've offered it. I also wanted to get your take on something else that feels as though it is the other prong of this rising authoritarianism, and that is the attack on the media. As Trump stood at the Justice Department on Friday, and he began this, his it was incredible, actually, this screed, which he sort of went after everything and every grievance. It was like that kind of stump speech, the angry, negative stump speech, and the Biden administration and all those people who came after me, and the weaponizing of the Justice Department, but then he picked on the media, and he not only picked the media, but he called out a couple of people by name. Tony, can you play a little bit of the Trump remarks for David? I want to get his take.
That's what he wanted to do. He wanted to scare the hell. They wanted to scare the hell out of the judges, and they do it. And how do you stop it if you're a judge? Because you want to go home, you have a family, you have children, and the New York Times will write whatever these people say, and the Washington Post, and the Wall Street Journal, and MSDNC, and the fake news CNN, and ABC, CBS, and NBC, and they'll write whatever they say. And what do you do to get rid of it? You convict Trump. All you have to do is be really tough on him and ultimately convict him, and they leave you alone. It's totally illegal what they do. I just hope you can all watch for it, but it's totally illegal. And it was so unfair what they were doing to her. But they do it all the time with judges. But in her case, she was very courageous, and it only made her angry. Wouldn't you say? It just made her angry. She didn't like it.
Okay, that's good. And now
How would Trump know what the judge's emotional state is unless there's been an improper communication?
Oh, that's a great point too. Play the second bit, Tony, in which he calls out people by name. So he talks about the illegality,
Mar-a-Lago, and did everything within their power to prevent me from becoming the president of the United States, with the help of radicals like Mark Elias, Mark Pomerantz, and these are people that nobody's ever seen anything like it. So many others, but these are people that are bad people, really bad people. They tried to turn America into a corrupt, communist, and third world country. But in the end, the thugs failed and the truth won. Freedom won, justice won, democracy won, and above all, the American people won. There could be no more heinous betrayal of American values than to use the law to terrorize the innocent and reward the wicked. And that's what they were doing at a level that's never been seen before.
Okay, thank you. That was it. So you see in that speech, which was impromptu, a lot of it, which means that, he had to, there's a...
He had to make it up as he went along.
Well, he ad-libbed around it with there's never been anything like it before, of course, but, I guess what I'm trying to say is those names, Mark Elias, and I think Norm Eisen, whoever, they were in the prompter, as was MSNBC, et cetera, which, David, I take to as the administration, those who are helping to craft that speech, they've agreed that this is a course that they want to pursue, and that is to go after the media. And that scares me as yet another prong of this rising authoritarianism.
Well, so what they're doing is dehumanizing. And this was a technique, it's been used on the right and the left, but it was most highly developed by the Marxist-Leninists, and in particular Mao during the Cultural Revolution. Educated class people in China were brought forth, put on stages with dunce caps on them, humiliated and denigrated. That's exactly what we saw Trump doing to President Zelensky when they ambushed him and shouted him down. There was no shouting match, there was a shouting down. And this is an old totalitarian technique. You dehumanize the people who will stand up to you. You take away any suggestion to your followers that they're worthy of being treated as human beings who have a different perspective. And you particularly invoke words like evil. And that should be a huge warning sign to us about what's going on. But unfortunately, as I just wrote in the chapter I turned in this morning for this British bite-sized book, Um, our Washington press corps is failing us. They keep viewing this through the historic kabuki theater access journalism style of Washington journalism, which reason that I would never move there. I turned down every request to go there. And the headline should be, focused on these things. Trump calls lawyers evil. Trump denigrates judges. And these should be major themes. And instead, we get the sort of, well, this is an unusual comment by the president. It sort of lacks historical context. It's not quite clear what he's intending. Quit sucking your thumb and write what he says in plain English. And don't, and print organizations do this all the time. They want a little short quote. Don't do that. Don't clean up his quotes. Don't put what you think he meant to say. Say, in a rambling address, Trump said, and give us 250 words of what he actually said. If you need to annotate it, if you need to put in brackets, he said tenure when he meant temperature, things like that, fine, do so. But really, the press corps is failing us here. And it's not that they, as some people seem to think, they love Trump or they're in somebody's pocket or they're being told what to do. It's that they are from a culture that's all built around access. Getting a quote for getting this senator to stop and talk to you or take your phone call. And that's why you tend to see certain members of Congress and the Senate, much more often in the news than others, because they're news hounds. Chuck Schumer was famous as a congressman as a news hound. It got him to the U.S. Senate. And now Chuck has decided to cooperate with Donald Trump rather than stand up to him, because standing up to him would mean some people are going to suffer. People are going to suffer anyway.
Let me follow up on that, because I would like your thought about what either concessions might have been extracted by Chuck Schumer in order to get the vote, or whether you thought he should stonewall it completely. What was the right move in your judgment?
I think the right answer for Hakeem Jeffries and Chuck Schumer is very simple. Mr. President, your party has a majority. If you can't get together to enact legislation to benefit this country, that's your problem, not our party's problem, especially when the president is calling us all sorts of vile terms. That's it.
So you would have let the government, you would have let the government shut down and let them own it, you're saying?
Yeah, and because it is going to cause harm. There is no two ways about it. These people are intent to cause harm. They're willing to let children starve to death. They're willing to let the Marburg and the MERS and other very lethal viruses, they kill a third to a half of the people who are infected, get loose and travel around the world. They're willing to signal to Netanyahu, go kill 400 people, mostly women, children, and the elderly, which is what the IDF just did in Gaza. They're going to do what they're going to do. So you don't cooperate with that. You make a moral and principled stance, and you say, we know some people will suffer, but no matter what we do, there will be suffering, and it's not our fault. We're not responsible for their causing the suffering. They are. And you got to pin the moral responsibility on them. And part of the problem here, Mark, is there's been a really serious decline in this country, not just in the reading scores I've talked about in the show, not just in the arithmetic understanding in this country, but of basic moral principles. Very few children now go to any kind of steady, significant religious training. My parents were non-believers, but I had to go to Sunday school when I was little so that I would get some sense of moral understanding. And I was expected to learn and understand about your moral obligations to your fellow, not just citizen, not just American or resident, but your fellow human beings. And a lot of that is not there at all. I mean, just stop somebody, get into a conversation with somebody who sits down next to you in the coffee shop and see if they can articulate moral principles. And I think you may well end up finding, even in the big cities where we tend to have the most educated populace, a lot of people have a hard time doing that.
Yeah, it's funny. I guess when I hear, I mean, everything you said makes sense. It's just, I find the religiosity that's now kind of being draped over so many different things. I mean, I understand it's pretty one-dimensional, but it's really not reflective of any kind of moral underpinning that this, for example, new administration has on people who need to be uplifted and people who need support. I mean, they're not reflected by the supposedly, the holy rollers that are a big part of this administration.
Well, we have a TV preacher in America who a couple of years ago literally asked people to pray and send him money because his corporate jet wasn't big enough. He needed $55 million. This televangelist from Ohio who says he'll send you the miracle cure water and your debts will go away. It's a little packet of commercially purchased water from Costco, it turns out. He is now finally coming under criminal investigation, not here in the U.S., but overseas. And I don't want people to get this wrong. Harvey Cox used to have me come speak at the Harvard Divinity School, one of a number of divinity schools I've spoken at. And he observed one time, because I had said something in a way that he thought was off, and he was correct. God wants you to prosper. If you believe in God, God wants you to prosper. What he doesn't want you to do is use your prosperity to oppress other people. And both the Old Testament and the New are full of your obligation, not just to your family or your community, but to the stranger. It is the stranger you owe. And people don't know that. And so what we have is a president filled with hatred and grievance and he has it so deeply that, Bandy Lee says, and I think she's right, the psychiatry professor who Yale fired, that it's a form of mental illness, and followers are infected, not literally in the sense of a pathogen, bacteria or a virus, but they adopt his mental illness as followers of cult-like organizations do. And our moral character here is all messed up. And there's one symbol that should really, I think, drive all that home. We have the richest man in the world taking away the opportunity for very poor children to get one healthy meal a day at their public school. And 1 in 5 American children goes hungry at least part of each month. 1 in 5 in this rich country. He is taken away food from children who will literally now starve to death overseas. And he is messing with Social Security. We don't know yet the full measure of what they're doing here, but there is now out the plan that would require, when you apply for Social Security, that you have to show up in person with all sorts of documentation to prove that you're eligible, which for people who are bedridden, maybe near death because they've got some horrible disease, that's going away. And all of this in the context of what appears, and I emphasize the word appears, to be a growing, small, but growing religious movement about the sin of empathy. If you think you're a Christian and you think empathy is a sin, you are really, really an anti-believer. You've been had by the devil if you're a believer. If you think that
there's so many different versions of Christianity too, David. Now, I mean,
yes.
There's this new branch where they feel that Jesus is too soft. They like hard Christianity. They're going. And then there's this, Ricky O'Bear one says, religion destroys reason. I mean, it is true that, I don't know, you can learn a lot. Here's another. Pam says you don't
religion
need...
doesn't have to religion doesn't have to destroy reason.
Of course not. Of course not. I mean, the Jesuits are brilliant, so often coming out of that program. You don't need religion to have a moral compass is certainly true, as Pam Pierce says. I mean,
Pam, thank you. That's a really good point. Ricky Gervais, the comedian, was asked on Stephen Colbert one night, and Colbert's a go-to-mass Catholic. Right. He asked him, well, what about having a moral compass? I mean, just go rape and murder. And he goes, I do all the raping and murdering I want to do, which is not, I mean, be responsible. You know, remember when the Republicans just talk about personal responsibility? Take responsibility for being a moral person, for teaching your children to be moral, for having regard, that word I'm trying to get back into our lexicon, regard for the other.
I'm going to finish up with you by asking about something related to economics and Trump's policy on tariffs. And also, it's very David K. Johnston, because it reminds me of so much of what you've written about in regard to who Trump is. It strikes me that he likes the tariffs, David K. Johnston, because he can announce them. He loves announcing stuff, is what I'm,
Right.
And then he can announce that he's not going to actually impose them, or he's going to impose. So there are a couple of announcements that he can make with these tariffs, and he is super powerful. In other words, you don't need any approval from Congress for these tariffs, because Congress has bypassed that. They've completely tapped out on that. They've surrendered to him the control on the tariffs. And lastly, it seems though he has very powerful people coming to him, basically auto manufacturers, et cetera, saying, please, Mr. President, don't impose these tariffs. So he gets everything he wants with these tariffs. He gets the announcement, he gets the attention, he gets the power, and he gets powerful people coming and begging to him.
Here's what he doesn't get. He doesn't get investment. He wants, you know, a lot of auto parts go from Michigan to Ontario to New York, back to Ontario, back to Pennsylvania. And he says, I want all those factories brought home. I don't want them to be in Canada, except if Canada's a 51st state. And you're not going to invest billions of dollars in a factory or even a retooling of a factory that you expect to last years based on the whims of this guy who flip-flops. That's another thing we should be saying. Donald flip-flops all the time. And yes, absolutely, Donald loves to humiliate people by making them bow down to him, whether it is literal or figurative. And he's got points of leverage on people. You'll notice that Jeff Bezos has changed the Washington Post editorial policies. He so far hasn't messed with the newsroom. So if you're a Post reader, keep reading the Post. There's lots of good journalism there. And Dr. Sun Xiong, who owns the LA Times, is doing more sort of weird things. But each of them's primary business is totally subject to abuse by the Trump administration. The doctor makes cancer medicines and is quite an accomplished scientist, world scale. We should be very glad this man is who he is and what he's accomplished, but he needs FDA approvals. And Jeff Bezos needs the cooperation of a whole bunch of things, from air traffic control to trucking regulation to the U.S. Postal Service. So let me leave you with one little thing.
All right.
I expect that before we're on again, I will have a story up, and I'll send you when it runs, about an old tax trick the Republicans are about to try to revive, which, if they succeed, which they didn't succeed the last time they tried this, because I exposed it on the front page of the New York Times in plain English. But if they were to succeed, here's what it means. If you are already rich, you will never have to pay taxes again. There's a very simple way to do that. You might pay a little tax, but insignificant taxes without having to do anything but a little bit of paperwork. And it's something Republicans understood 100 years ago when they saw what could be done and put a stop to it. But today, it's ideology, not real tax policy in Washington.
I look forward to that piece. And when we visit again, I want to talk about Voice of America, which has been now completely taken apart. And I'd love to talk about this media environment and how important VOA is, or whether or not things have changed. So let's put that on the back burner for our next visit.
Okay.
Great stuff, David. Thank you. David K. Johnston.
Take care, Mark.
All
Bye-bye.
the best, my friend. Hi, it's Mark, and I thought that was great. Hit the notification bell. You'll know whenever there's a new video being dropped, and please subscribe to our channel to help us save the universe.